Okay, welcome everyone. And I just want to welcome you first of all to this live stream on AI and education from Asia Biblical Theological Seminary. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Greg Brujink. I teach Old Testament here at ABTS, and we have a panel here tonight. We're going to spend some time just thinking about AI and education and considering the different aspects that we need to consider as we are thinking about how to use and how not to use AI in education. And I appreciate you all taking the time to attend. And we're going to consider from a number of different perspectives tonight. But before we do anything else, I want to give our panel members just a chance to introduce themselves. So if you could please introduce yourselves. Ben, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Greg. My name is Ben Wargis. I'm a visiting faculty in quite a few institutions, teaching on ethnography, intercultural engagement, and ethnodoxology. I'm also a computer scientist developing games and AI apps. Thank you.
Bernhard, why don't you go next?
Yeah, thanks. So hello, my name is Bernhard Ortmann, and I'm an independent consultant specializing in teaching qualitative research skills. And I just recently launched a collection of AI research guides that give reflective advice for qualitative researchers throughout the whole process. And it's available for free on the ChatGPT's GPT store. And what brought me to this was my journey from teaching and researching at universities in Germany in the field of intercultural theology, and then moving into the field of international development. So I went to Myanmar in 2018 and collaborated with civil society organizations there to build their capacity in qualitative research. And since then, my work really centers around empowering researchers and activists in challenging contexts in conducting qualitative research. And I use traditional methods, but also the cutting edge AI tools that are accessible now to really make qualitative research more accessible and also more impactful.
Okay, thank you, Bernhard. Daryl?
Yes, hi. My name is Daryl Meekins. I have spent a large part of my early career in theological education and missions work around the world, but particularly in Africa. And for the past decade plus, I've been involved with various institutions in the instructional design and learning technology space, helping them develop programs across the board, and particularly over the last few years, working as a consultant in learning innovation and specializing in thinking through design. And of course, more recently, thinking through how we can incorporate the tools that we'll talk about today and some of the philosophy behind it into the work that we do.
Thanks, Daryl. And thank you everyone again for joining us tonight for the panel. And as I mentioned, ABTS, we wanted to spend some time addressing issues of AI. We have an AI policy that was made about, I don't know, a year ago, but things have changed so much even since then. It's a really fast changing field, and we wanted to consider a lot of different aspects about it, like what is out there, what is it exactly, what ethics are there involved in it, in using it for coursework, more than just what am I allowed to do and what I'm not allowed to do. And we also realized that people attending tonight, some of you, maybe this is a new topic and you're attending because you just don't really know anything about it. So we have some questions that I'm going to ask our panel members tonight first. And as we're going through some of these questions, if you have a question that you have, we want to reserve some time at the end. So if you're on the YouTube live stream with us, you can just throw the questions in the comments and I'll look through them as we're talking through some of those other questions. And at the end, we'd love to address some of the questions that you have specifically about this if they don't get answered in our time together. So as we are starting out on this topic, for people who don't know, if any of you wants to answer, could you just really briefly explain what these current AI tools are? I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of tools, obviously, but specifically the kinds of tools that people would be using in education. What are these AI tools? What do they do? How are people using them?
I think I can start with just like the general backdrop. So the kind of AI that we are talking about here is what is called generative AI, which is like, I think a major feature of it is that it's not rule-based, like traditional software, where the same input would produce the same output because there are certain rules guiding the way that works. But the AI that we are talking about is, you can say it's somewhat creative and dynamic based on the patterns in the training data and also based on the context that the user provides. And that's, I think, what it really, what sets it apart, because it makes it very versatile. It has very broad abilities, going from something like ideation, brainstorming, writing texts, even tutoring. And it's at the same time very much personalized. If you prompt it the right way, it can really adapt to your needs. And yeah, that's also, I've mentioned it already, what drove me into this direction of wanting to create something like an AI personalized guide that kind of guides you through qualitative research. And I think it's very exciting that something like this is possible even for someone like me who is not a software developer. So you can use natural language actually to steer these AI models in the way they behave. And yeah, that's, I think, what really makes them special and so exciting.
Just to add on to what Bernard is saying, most users today would be using what we call a chatbot and having a chat kind of interface. And if some of the users know that this was actually started in the 1960s with a program called ELIZA, which imitated a doctor doing a kind of like a interaction with a patient. We've gone from there, 1960s, to what we have today, where literally because of the data set that Bernard was referring to, because of how much data we have, the AI, I'm just going to use the term AI for now, but actually we should use the term large language model, because that's exactly what it is. It's taking these data set and looking at the user context and predicting what can be the next set of words. And we've come to a point where we can personalize that for research and personalize that even for ideation, as Bernard was saying. I think maybe we can talk about even semantic scholar, which is very commonly used nowadays in research, if anyone wants to add to that.
Daryl, did you have anything to add about currently what's on the table as far as these AI tools?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as we said, the large language models are the ones that people are generally talking about. And what I think we're noticing is that the way in which people are using tools like that can incrementally increase the ability for them to do things that they previously maybe didn't have the skill set to do. So writing code, for example, might be one of those things, or even producing graphics and artwork using, a Canva or a Gamma or any of these other types of tools that will generate artwork mid-journey pretty quickly. So there's things like that people can use that are really sort of very utilitarian. But I think at the same time, the well-worn saying, I think, over the past couple of years has been, AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who knows how to use AI is going to take your job, and we're not necessarily thinking about what that impact necessarily is going to have on someone's employment in this conversation. But I think what we're realizing is that the integration of various types of tools are just going to become so commonplace that it's almost going to be like, could you use a word processor back in the day? Do you know how to use Microsoft Word or something like that? And if you couldn't, well, then there's certain jobs that are just no longer going to be able for you to access. So I think we're very quickly getting to that place now if we're not there already.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm wondering if any of you want to answer, just really quickly. And again, I realize that probably a lot of our students, people tuning in, have used these tools, but if you could maybe in just like a sentence or two or three, explain like what would you consider to be like the main difference between these tools and like just Googling an answer? Like how is it different both in the experience of it, but also what's going on underneath that?
Maybe I'll start off and then with Google, most of the time it's doing what is called as a lexical search. It's looking at the keywords and matching that to what they see in documents. But what we have currently with AI is what we call semantic search. It tries to understand the meaning of your question. And there's a technical aspect to it, which I won't go into now, if anyone wants to know. It understands the meaning of your question and then matches that with documents that have similar meaning. So that's one fundamental difference. If anyone wants to add.
What I always find makes this so different from the experience side is that since this kind of AI has been launched, since ChatGPT basically was launched about 2 years ago, you can now talk to your computer and the computer will most often really understand you. You can even use your voice. There's something called voice mode. I don't know if many of you have tried it probably already. So that's, I think, also something that is really new and quite powerful. You can just talk to a computer. It was not possible to do that before in the same way.
Daryl, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the big differences, is that the personalization and customization piece of what you can do with AI tools these days is markedly different from what we could all access before. So if you think of it as if you and I Googled the same thing using the same words, we get the same result. That's not necessarily true with some of these large language models, that depending on how they have been trained or customized, we might ask for the same thing but get quite different results. Even ourselves, when we ask questions in different ways, we'll get different results as well. So that the level of customization and difference is quite marked.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point as we're considering this topic of AI in education. The fact that it's coming up with different answers. It's not as simple as just like Googling it, or professors have always had Turnitin, it's called, before, where like a student turns in a paper and they just cut and pasted from a source, and we can see that. And so there's been a little bit of crisis in education, because how do we know that students are really learning, or are they just putting these questions into a GPT and it's spitting out an answer, and then they're giving that to us? And so as educators, of course, we have a lot of concerns and a lot of questions, but part of the reason that we wanted to do this webinar, this little discussion, is that we don't just want to talk about things that we're afraid of, but also opportunities in that. And so I was wondering, Bernhard, on the topic of how we can use these AI tools to have more personalized learning experiences. You've done, as far as I know, like the most focused work in kind of tailoring a GPT to be used to help teach people, and using almost like a conversational question model. Could you share with us about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so it's a collection of tools, and I've called them quali guides because it's really focused on qualitative research, not on quantitative. And guides because they should act as a guide that takes you by your hand and maybe shows you a direction, but doesn't force you anywhere, and also is not carrying you there, but just walking alongside you and being someone who can offer some guidance. And so I think in terms of personalization, this is what really excites me about this opportunity, using AI in that way. Because if you steer or set them up, instruct those GPTs, so those are optimized or specialized, customized versions of ChatGPT that you can create if you have this Plus account, the paid version of ChatGPT, but they can be used by anyone, also if you are on the free plan. So if you create them and provide instructions for them, they will behave in a certain way, and you can use those instructions. You can write them just like you would instruct a human, just write what they should be doing. And so I try to, in my instructions, to be really clear that those GPTs should act as a reflective tutor. So they should encourage critical and analytic thinking on the side of the user, instead of just spitting out the answer, as you said, which is something that can happen more easily with the out-of-the-box ChatGPT model if you ask for an answer to a question. So the GPTs that I've created will be in this kind of reflective mode and get you into thinking about your problem yourself, maybe identifying problematic areas, giving you hints, and thus steering you in the right direction, hopefully. And so this makes it possible that they give really tailored advice, pinpoint users' weaknesses, offer a kind of scaffolding that hopefully gets them to the next step. And also, they break down complex tasks. Qualitative research is something that can be quite daunting and complex, but I've designed it in such a way that the individual tasks are broken down in a step-by-step manner, so they become more manageable. And this also has the side effect that the user has a lot of control, because if it's individual tasks, small tasks that they are discussing about with the AI gets feedback all the time from the user, what they want, where they are, and gets these reflective responses, which then make the AI response even more, richer and more tailored towards the needs of the user. So there are all sorts of kinds of techniques, prompt engineering, it's called, that allow you to set something up like this. But it's fundamentally just using natural language and explaining in a very clear way to the AI how you want it to behave. And yeah, I hope it's useful for people. And that's what I think I would like to say about personalization and QualiGuides, the tool that I have developed.
Thank you. I just wanted to add really quickly, because Bernhard came and presented to us at ABTS, and I know all of us were very, I want to say impressed, but also encouraged, because so far a lot of our discussions and just questions and experience with AI was, just trying to figure out how to get students to do their own work. And it is a temptation of these tools. But then as Bernhard came in and showed us QualiGuides and how it works, it was so encouraging to us to just experience this tool that is asking you questions and causing you to do your own thinking. So it's your own work, your own thinking, but it's helping you to do it better, because it's coming not in for you, but alongside you to help you to think better. And to me, that was really, really encouraging. And we really appreciated him coming. But I'm wondering, Ben or Daryl, if you have anything that you want to add on just thoughts about how AI could be used in maybe some other ways for personalized learning experiences.
Well, with the whole chatbot experience, one of the things that I've been pushing is using AI for assessing. So essentially, it does a viva or an oral kind of examination where you ask questions and it tries to figure out where the student has learned. So that's something that I'm in the process of developing using open source large language models, just so that we can keep the costs down. And the idea is, I think, Greg, you'll remember me saying this, in an age where AI can write your assignment, let's use AI to create assessments. And that is one thing that I'm pushing as one of the future ways in which digital pedagogy will be going.
Great.
Yeah, I think on that, so I agree. I think there's definitely the usage, particularly from the other side. So if we're thinking of the user as maybe a professor or a teacher or something, how might they integrate AI? Certainly assessment design is part of that. I think one of the things that we're starting to notice is a hyper personalized learning journey focus that students are starting to experience and starting to expect to some degree. So one of maybe we'll get to this later, but I think one of the implications of tools like this can be that it's really about what I want to learn and how I want to learn it and those type of things, which doesn't comport very well with very systematized learning approaches that we have in colleges and universities, where it's sort of a one size fits all. And even in the learning management system environment, it's sort of, this is the content, this is how it works. When people say, well, I'd like to do this first, and I'd like to go to number 3 next, and number 5 after that, there really isn't a lot of scope in that. So we're seeing even some LMSs like Nectar and Cypher that are being developed that are centered around hyper-personalized learning journeys where people can choose their own adventure, if you like. And I think there's intrigue in that. There is also some concern, which maybe we'll get to. But I think on the assessment piece, particularly when it comes to digital pedagogy, adding the critical part to that is also important sometimes, because there are certainly formative assessment pieces that we have sort of taken for granted a lot of times with student learning, that scaffolding that Bernard was talking about. When it comes to summative ways in which people can be judged on their competency, judged on their ability, then it becomes more intriguing as to who should be making that assessment. If you think of an apprentice model, for example, where somebody would observe you doing something and saying, yeah, now you know how to do this because I saw you do it. There are some ways in which people are talking about doing that through simulations, and I've seen a few exemplars of that which have been quite impressive. But it does sort of also beg the question, is ultimately a human the best judge of another human's behavior and abilities? Or to what degree can those processes be taken into the cyberspace? So those are just some intriguing questions, I think, when it comes to learning design.
Yeah, and this kind of leads into a question I was going to ask a little bit later, but since we're already kind of on the topic, one of the big things that it's already come up several times, but what are the limitations? Because especially in like graduate education, seminary education, ABTS, one of our values is critical thinking, right? So how does this work together? Like, what are the limitations of AI in teaching critical thinking? Is it possible? I mean, I know talking about Quali Guides, that is kind of doing it, but what are some cautions or worries that maybe you have, or even solutions to how can we use or not use AI tools in a way that encourages critical thinking and ensures that we're still doing the hard work of thinking and understanding things?
I'll maybe start with this one. I think it's a crucial question because I think our tendency at times is to jump all in uncritically. And so because, like I said earlier, people are concerned about how this digital revolution is going to change people's lives, their livelihoods. It's sort of almost a frantic and frenetic approach to saying, I've just got to learn all these things and adopt them immediately, otherwise I'm in trouble. And I think there's problems with that because we all have seen and heard different ways in which even the large language models based on data make mistakes. And of course, the little, if you read the fine print under even ChatGPT, they'll say, we make mistakes, and so double check everything, and especially in research, we've seen ways in which citations have been invented, and just all those kinds of things which are problematic, because at the end of the day, a lot of the LLMs are looking to find you a solution to the question that you're asking or the problem you're trying to solve. And even if that solution is not real, it's still seen as a solution. And so that's something where the critical thinking aspect needs to be always part of the interrogation of the ideas that come out of what we're generating. The other side to it, I think that is important too, is the sort of humanics, or human augmented learning. And we're certainly now, I think, more and more in an era where we understand how AI is going to be integrated, whether it's from assessment design, or it's from evaluation, or it's plagiarism checking. It's just across the board, there's different elements of AI that's going to be woven in. But the question is the teaching and learning ultimately a human orientated paradigm practice where there needs to be that sort of level of interaction so that a person can authentically assess whether or not somebody has achieved a certain competency or goal. And of course, it would depend on what it is. So if you're checking if somebody can do 1+1 is 2, that can sort of be an automatic checker. Yes, you did it or not. But in your fields of counseling or in other areas where there's a human-centered EQ, CQ component to the discussions that people might have, um, you know, machines aren't culturally intelligent, machines aren't emotionally intelligent, and they don't possess those qualities that are uniquely human. So if we completely forget that in our teaching and learning experiences, I think we're setting ourselves up for some trouble, and ultimately learners who are only versed in this environment, they haven't had the experience that maybe some of us who are a little bit older might have experienced, having to deal with such things as libraries and having to work with sort of maybe a more old-fashioned model. If they've only been versed in this ecosystem, then I think it's rife for a lot of misinterpretation and, frankly, a lot of sort of human devoid elements, which could be problematic.
Just taking off on what Daryl was saying, a lot of our pedagogy is based on our generation, but when we just go down Gen Z onwards, they absorb information completely differently. Now, I have friends' kids who learn using Minecraft, for example. And this is the question of what is the future of education, theological education, or any other education? What are we looking towards? Is it going to, we have to, this is my personal push, that we have to look at our pedagogy and change our pedagogy to adapt to what is going to come next. And just in my interaction with, as an educator for about 20 years, I've seen that if students are really interested in the subject, they will make that effort. It's how do you get them to be interested? If they're not, they're going to use ChatGPT to cut, copy, paste an assignment. And so the assessment design and how we work through that is extremely important. In a more technical way, we can fine-tune LLMs so that it is more appropriate to what we want in an educational institution. And that is also one of the ways in which we will be, like we talked about earlier, running LLMs locally in our college campuses on a server, and using that to create a very customized learning experience for these students. That's one of the ways I see things going forward.
I want to add just something really quickly too, that this is maybe a little bit different than this aspect of critical thinking. But Ben, just because you mentioned, like putting like a local type thing, I want to get really practical even, because we've talked about a lot of like big picture, like very heavy type things, but beyond just like saying, I can put my question in here and get out an answer and use it to fill up my homework. There's a lot of use for these. We've been playing around here at ABTS. We fed our catalog, our ABTS catalog, and our academic policies into Notebook LM, one of the free systems from Google, where you limit what information is going into it, and then it analyzes that for you. And what happens is that you can type in a question, how many credits do I need to graduate for this degree? And it will tell you. And it will tell you where it got that information. Well, that's not critical thinking. It's not, like anything that is really high level, but it is helpful, right? And so there's a lot of uses beyond even in education, beyond even learning or critical thinking, that you can use it for really, we would consider, I don't know, grunt work, or like, like things where I don't want to have to read through this ABTS catalog for the 57th time because I can't remember where this is or what this class is about. And so there's a number of ways that these tools can be used in addition to some of the things that we've talked about as well, that I just wanted to mention as well. And thank you both for your thoughts on critical thinking as well. What do you think are some of the most promising ways? And in this question, I want to be more specific, not just LLMs in general or AI tools in general, but what do you think is, personally for you, the most promising uses for some of these AI tools in education?
Maybe I can start quickly. So one kind of promising light at the horizon, so to speak, that really drew me to creating these tools, quality guides that I've talked about, was that I think this is really scalable on a level that is unprecedented. So, for example, a more obvious way to think about this would be the AI obviously is more accessible than a human, right? It doesn't sleep. It doesn't have commitments that it's keeping it from talking to you. So you can access it basically anywhere and anytime as long as you have an internet connection and you have a device, but even a phone would do, right? A smartphone. And from my time in being in Myanmar, even in remote areas, you had quite good internet connection and many people had smartphones. So that kind of gets me excited that such kind of tools, if they are well designed, optimized for pedagogical purposes, and are easily accessible even to people who are disadvantaged on several levels. That is really interesting. And also in terms of language, that's another thing that I experienced often in Myanmar in my work with the civil society organizations there. I had to communicate with them in English, and that creates kind of a barrier. So you cannot speak to all the people. To some you can speak, but still it's kind of effortful sometimes. And they are doing their best, but also when they want to access the literature, for example, this creates quite a big hurdle to overcome. Looking at methodology books, for example, how to conduct research, the good ones are written in English, and there are some maybe tailored ones for the people in Myanmar, but they have their shortcomings. So I'm also excited about the fact that ChatGPT and all these other models are available in many, many languages, not in all, but I've heard something between 50 and 100 languages. Still, it works best in English, of course, but it's usable in other languages as well, which makes it even more accessible. So that's, I think, something that is quite promising.
Yeah, jumping off what Bernard said, even when I travel, just to use something like this to translate in real time with a very a 1 to 2 second delay is huge. And also in my context of when I do documentaries, I can transcribe, almost in about 100 languages. And that's where technology is going. And exactly what Bernard said, even though most of it is in English, there's still a lot that's coming out in other languages. So that's a huge promising thing. And personally for me, just the fact that I can put in a PDF and get a summary where I don't have to read the entire article right away, and I can keep doing that. And then when I find an article that I really want to get down into, then I start reading the article. So the summarization capabilities of LLMs are huge for me. And the future is these are going to be running on your phones in what we call SLMs, small language models. So they'll be able to be run on your phones without internet sometime in the future. There's still some snags. But imagine what you can do when you have that on your phone and what it opens to, whether it's reading, whether it's talking to your phone and getting answers. I'm excited about those things as well.
Yeah, I think as we've been saying, probably one of the things that we notice from either a student or a teacher point of view, or just in general, is that there's time-saving aspects to these tools that we've now been able to generate. And so if we're able to save time in certain areas, grunt work, I think, Greg, as you put it, just being able to go through long pages of documents that we'd have to actually physically page through or scan through a PDF. Now we can get that answer. And so things like Notebook LM and Consensus, I think those are great apps actually to help us understand how you can, ring fence your particular learning that you want to have and have it be accurate in its responses. So great time saver. There's even tools like Ministry AI, which I came across the other day, which is maybe more on the debatable side, but it's everything from sermon generation to notes that you could do to how to resolve conflict, and you can even make a little avatar of a pastor so he could be on call 24/7 on the app or something. So there's things like that we might think as more gimmicky, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of time saving that can be done, even for learners, students as well, to be able to create artifacts. You can create things like images and diagrams and things like that typically in the past might have taken some kind of graphic design skill to have, but now you can generate as part of your assessment and make it more creative. Even things like PowerPoints and what have you that used to take a long time to have to kind of find the right way to do it, gets a lot easier now. So the question is going to be, what do we do with that other time that we have? Elon Musk kind of talks about, well, all of these robots are going to do everything for us, and we can just kind of sit back and relax and just watch them all, mow the lawn and walk the dog and all that kind of stuff. And there is something though about the work of people and how we busy ourselves about our work that I think is going to be sort of one of the next questions. So time saving, great. Increased productivity, fantastic. But what do we do with all this time that we've now saved, and are we putting it to the best use with our thinking and our activity? So,
Yeah, thank you. And I feel like, and this is a good thing, that we've been painting this really rosy picture of a future with robot servants or something. I don't know. I don't know, but there has been a discussion going on in the chat comments a little bit that we also wanted to talk about. And that is, and I'm going to ask you, Daryl, again, to kind of address this one first, and then Ben and Bernhard, you can add to it. What kind of ethical frameworks do we need to have for students or seminary students specifically, like around using these AI tools? What kind of questions should we be asking? And I can say, from the ABTS standpoint, just first, that we do not forbid the use of ChatGPT, but we say that if you use it, you need to cite it like any other source. You can't just cut and paste it and not tell us. Otherwise, that is plagiarism, And certain uses of it are really useful that some of them we've talked about, like brainstorming, helping you to think better. Cutting and pasting, obviously not. But what are some of the deeper issues and ethical questions that there are in using this specifically in education and for assignments? And what kind of guardrails do we need for that kind of work?
Yeah, I think it's sort of a wild west at the moment. So there's a lot of clamoring to figure out what kind of boundaries do we put around this? Why do we put those boundaries around? So certainly something like a statement of ethics for an institution around the use of AI is absolutely essential now. So something to put in that catalog of yours, Greg, would be a statement around, what do we think about AI? How do we utilize it in our ecosystem, not only for students, but also for professors, to what extent is their content original? If people are paying for it, for example, should they expect that it is something that's coming directly from the person who's teaching the class or from the institution, or if it's sort of generated by AI, should we give them a discount or something? I don't know. But so there's those kind of questions. The other aspect to it, I think, when it comes to, as you mentioned, referencing and all of those aspects, it's good practice in any kind of academic setting where people would cite their sources, wherever they come from. So like you say, giving due reference to ChatGPT is important. However, it's not as simple as that, because in essence, what GPT is giving you is original. So, technically, is it plagiarism? You can debate that. But I think that from a student perspective, what I've noticed over the last couple of years teaching online, especially, is that you can tell. So it's just like the old days when you can tell whether somebody has copied something from a book, and they've just kind of written it in there or they've typed it in there. You can tell. GPT uses very overly verbose language. It doesn't use everyday kind of terminology. It loves words like underscore, and things that people don't typically use in everyday language. So it tends to use very flowery language, and that's a sort of a dead giveaway. So for any students, kind of listening to this, like, it's the copy and paste actually doesn't work very well. And of course, there are plagiarism checkers that look for AI, but we also know there's AI-proof kind of assessment or assignment builders too. I think one of the deeper concerns, perhaps, is for people to think through the actual idea generation. One of the things that's uniquely human, or if you put it into a biblical theological framework, that humans were unleashed to do is be creative. And of course, all of these LLMs and these other tools are a manifestation of human creativity at its outset. But if we just simply put all of our creativity in a box and just say, well, you tell me what to do. You develop my business plan. You develop, my menu, all these things that before we would have to put some of our creative energies into doing ourselves. I fear that we're actually not making ourselves smarter as at the end of the day. And what we want students to walk away from programs with is, I would think, a celebration of their ability to create new knowledge and be able to do things that maybe hasn't been done in previous generations. So we have to use the tools, but not sort of succumb to them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to add something really quick on that topic, because I really appreciated what you said at the end. I have a really good friend who teaches at a high school in an international school. And I feel a lot worse for him because to me, as we're talking about theological education and graduate education, it's a slightly different field, right? Because high school students, they just want to get it done, cut and paste, it's over, right? But for me, I guess making an appeal to theological students, like, you've made choices to be here. You wanted to get this education for a reason. And if you're using it just cut and paste, you're not accomplishing what you set out to do, right? You're not accomplishing that character formation. You're not accomplishing your cognitive formation. You're not actually learning. And so I think that we do have, again, at least at ABTS and other theological institutions, maybe a slightly easier job with those ethical questions, because I don't think anyone, set out to go into seminary to cheat. But, it happens, and you get busy, and there's always ways you justify things. But I guess my plea for people that are listening, when thinking about this stuff, is I think it's pretty, I don't want to say it's totally cut and dried, really easy to say what's cheating and what's not. But when you're doing your own work and when you're not, and when you're just cutting and pasting and when you're not. And I guess the thing that to me is so interesting about this, and we had actually had a couple minutes together, all of us, before the stream started, that I mentioned as we were trying to put this little seminar together. I was doing a lot of research with these AI tools, and something that Bernhard had said when he presented to ABTS, I found really true over these past couple of weeks as I've been dealing with a lot of these tools. And that's that the more you know about your subject, the more useful these tools are. That you maybe can go to it and ask a really broad question and get a broad answer. But if you know exactly what you're doing and you know a lot about your field, these tools, like Daryl's already said, and the other guys too, that they're really huge time savers. Like, you can do these things, but you're saving so much time but you still know what it's doing and how it's doing it, you can actually make it more useful to yourself. And so I guess if nothing else, I'm appealing to students to learn how to do things so that then you can use these tools better, right? Because yeah, just we'll get into it, I think maybe a little bit later when we talk. I want to ask some questions about specific academic tools, but I found some of the specific academic AIs to be so incredibly useful and helpful in getting some things done quickly that used to take a long time. But yeah, so I just wanted to make that quick appeal to all students out there that yeah, you can do it, but you're really hurting yourself. And I just appeal to you that you set out in this education for a reason, and that was to get an education. And so make sure that you're doing that. But I did get a little sidetracked there. So Ben or Bernhard, did either of you have anything to add as far as like ethical boundaries or frameworks that we should consider?
Yeah, and I was just as Daryl and Greg, you were talking, there's also one thing to talk about when we appeal to students is that a lot of these LLMs are based on data that exists and has biases. And so when we approach a subject and we ask a question, you're going to get a slightly biased answer. And that will actually prevent you from learning more rather than you applying that. And this is something that we're talking about across the stream, not just in education, but right across ideation and all of that. If our data sets are, say, primarily from Western sources, then your biases are going to be Western. And if you're studying that in Asia, you're going to be learning a biased form of education, cut, copy, paste, or ideation. And this is something that we need to address right away. And I would appeal to students or anyone listening that consider the fact that it is possible that you are getting biased information from these LLMs.
Yeah, a point that I wanted to add is I think it boils down, and it really, I think, ties back to what Daryl and Greg said. It boils down to the question, what do you want to achieve? Like, what is your goal? And if your goal is to develop expertise in your field, in whatever you set out to do with your education, then I think it is really critical that you go through the things that build expertise. And we know from experience, I know it from my own experience, but we also have studies that show this, that there is something called desirable difficulty. So humans learn when something is difficult. That's what triggers what is called neuroplasticity, causes changes in your brain, basically, that is called learning in the end. So if we bypass this difficulty too much or at crucial stages or in crucial areas of our field, we won't develop this expertise that we actually set out to develop in the first place. So that's something where I think we all need to be careful in how we are using the AI, to not use it to bypass this journey of learning, but to enhance it and yeah, make us even more experts, right? But it's really a tricky balance that you yourself have to strike in a way. And I think a skill that we need to develop to do this is related to agency. We have to understand ourselves what we really want, because in an AI you can tell it. You know, for example, if you think about these AIs, they can create pictures. You can say, I want a picture of a nice sunset, and it will do it. You will get a nice sunset picture. But it's kind of the average sunset, right? So the way AI works is it produces a kind of an average of the training data, like the common patterns there. And so it's not your sunset in a way. But if you are very specific, if you have a clear picture in your mind of how you want this sunset to look like, you can describe that and explain it in some detail to the AI, and you will get a kind of an original picture that is more on the side of originality than on the side of the average. And I think that is really like a crucial skill. First of all, knowing yourself what you want to achieve, and then also having the methods to explain to the AI, knowing how to deal with the AI to get what you want.
Great. Thanks everyone for your thoughts. Um, we've asked ethically, but do you have any other, I don't know, concerns, any of you, about using AI in education that we haven't covered? Maybe not just about ethical questions, but just practically speaking, or anything like that?
I think just one thing to think about is people talk these days about deep fakes and clones and things like that. And so one of the courses I'm teaching right now for ABTS is around sort of digital media and ministry. And kind of one of the experiments, if you like, that's running in that course is using avatars as a means of content distribution. And I think that it's an interesting experiment to see whether or not it actually matters to people. Whether if you know that the image speaking to you, the picture that's speaking to you, the person is not actually a person. Um, does that make a difference if the content is deemed to be helpful, or is there something cognitively in us that would make us almost dismiss or maybe even disrespect or something, something that we know is not actually real? And so I think that's an interesting juncture that we find ourselves now, because of course everyone's rushing to, voice cloning and image cloning and things like that as again, another means of saving time and sort of, distributing yourself. But I wonder, and I don't have data to sort of inform this as yet. I think it's still too new as to what the sociological, pedagogical impacts are on people learning from a virtual Greg versus a real Greg, and if it matters at all, and to what degree. I think it's an interesting question that we need to keep wrestling with.
Funny that you bring it up, because we've actually had quite a discussion in the ABTS office about these digital clones and how convincing they are. I tried out one of the digital clone services, just like really, really terrible video, only uploaded 30 seconds, and my wife couldn't tell it wasn't me. And I'm thinking about all the time I can save recording all my class videos, So these are important questions, not just for students, but for professors too. Like the tools that we use, they form us, right? They change us. It's not like things are neutral. And we can pretend that using a computer is the same as using a shovel. They change us in different ways, right? And so what are these generations of technological tools doing to us, and how are they changing us and how we think about things? Or like you mentioned, Daryl, how we treat people or not people, or how we interact. Yeah. Ben or Bernhard, do you have any other concerns about anything AI?
Well, just to take on what you all were saying, this is the same thing that happened in 1967 with ELIZA. When the doctor program was running, the person who created it knew that this was artificial, but the secretary started to think that this is almost human-like. And we now call that anthropomorphic cognitive bias, where we assign a human-like emotion to what we're listening to. And so that is how a lot of people who are maybe of the younger generation look to some of these things. And we are talking metaverse, and we're talking about how things work in that space. So is this a limitation, or is this the future? This is a question. It is definitely the future, but is it a limitation? Can we think beyond that? These are still questions we're wrestling with, but there is something where we assign human-like attributes to machines, and that takes over what we could have in real-life human interaction. I wonder if anyone else wants to comment on that.
Daryl or Bernhard, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just say that you're right. There's open question about it. I mean, we've seen recent cases and situations, even some movies around people that sort of develop romantic feelings on a sort of with AI chatbot type feature. I think it also raises profoundly theological questions around can a chatbot or an avatar pastor or priest lead somebody to Christ, if they have the right words, those kinds of things. So does God use that as another means, a mechanism to do his work in the world? And so there's some intriguing questions around even that in terms of faith practice. We already see, AI writing worship songs and even leading worship and things like that. And so that to me is where I also come back to the question on how people actually see that. Whether it sort of an AI can lead somebody in a spiritual transformation experience when the AI itself does not know what that is, has not experienced that. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think I would like to make a more general remark related to concerns, because what we've just discussed, I think it shows that there are two ends of the extremes where you can be here. You can be very cautious and maybe too cautious and get hung up on questions of, ethics. We've talked about that, and what we've just talked about now, like kind of mimicking humans and what the effects of that are emotionally, spiritually, or in what area. And these are all very legitimate questions, and we should all wrestle with them, and they're very important. But there's also this other extreme where you could rush this and not look at those questions and just throw AI at everything. And this also has really huge downsides. Like I was just talking about the danger of a lack of expertise in the future. If you go into if you follow this line of thinking, you could even think that maybe in 1 or 2 generations there are no experts anymore because we all skip the learning and let the difficult stuff for the AI. And then you, of course, you become over-reliant on the AI, which could be very problematic as well. So there are those extremes, and I think we have to find somewhat a middle ground. And it's still very early days, so it's very hard to find out where and how this looks. So I think it's really good to stick to what you know well, to your expertise, and be very practical and think about how can I make thoughtful use of AI in that field in which I think I'm able to make a good judgment. What an ethical use would be, something that really contributes to the good in the world in the long term. So yeah, but those are intriguing questions without clear answers, I think.
Great. Thanks all of you for your thoughts. I did want to remind everyone that's tuned in that I see there are some comments going through, and there have been a couple questions, and I do want to bring a couple of them up. But if you have more questions, please feel free now to put them in the comments. We're starting to get to an hour. We don't want to go too much longer. I want to allow these guys to either get to bed or to get to their day, in the case of Daryl, who's in the US right now. But so one of the questions that we had, we kind of painted this really rosy picture of AI, and then it's been a little bit more doom and gloom for the past couple minutes about some of these concerns. But I want to ask just really practically, because we've had some of these questions in the comments. We said, well, don't plagiarize, don't do this. What are some real use cases that a student could specifically use that you think would be okay and useful for an assignment, like a kind of assignment it would be good for, or a certain tool? And this is maybe where we can dip a little bit more into the academically oriented AIs. I don't know what you're familiar with or what are not familiar with, but maybe we can bring up some of those or any other things you think might be helpful. Like how can you practically as a student use AI to help you in an ethical way?
I'll just quickly start off by saying, think of AI as a research assistant and a tool. And I've used Semantic Scholar, for example, and Consensus. And it helps you. It's not just a Google search. It's a semantic search. It understands the meaning of your question and tries to match you with relevant articles. So that's one clear, easy way you can use it. And then to summarize, you can put it into Claude or ChatGPT and summarize some of these PDFs articles that we're using. Also, I'm not sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but when I see DeepSeek, which has just come out, DeepSeek's R1 does a very good job of showing you the train of thought of how it is thinking through your question. And for me, and some of my students who've been using it, that train of thought helps them to think further. Just watching, oh, this is how this chain of thought is going. I can use that, change my question accordingly. So it's actually helping you develop critically how to change your question. And that's an interesting, this is quite recent, but I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah, I think definitely I would recommend that people try QualiGuides, of course, since I've put it out there and I think it is helpful. And maybe just to give an example, so if you are writing your thesis at the end of your, bachelor thesis or master thesis or something like that, or something like a term paper where you have to give an overview of the literature on a certain topic or something like that, I think it can be very useful to look at your research design. This would be for the thesis, where you, for example, get into a discussion with the AI to narrow down your topic to really pinpoint a manageable focus that is still very interesting. Maybe then you identify appropriate sources for that focus, and then in collaboration with the AI, getting feedback from the AI and so on, you develop your research questions. So that would be a use case for research design. But then you can also go into literature search. We have already heard about tools that are available. And in QualiGuides, I have also a tool that you can use before you go to something like Consensus or SciSpace, those AI-powered search engines, which helps you first kind of get this broader picture of what your research actually relates to, so that you have the disciplines and the major concepts, like a kind of a map that allow you to then go into those tools and search for literature that relates to your actual study. And there's another one for guided reading, for example, which first helps you identify a focus for a source, for an article that you want to read, for example. And then it will develop a couple of guided reading questions that you can have alongside the text while you're reading it. And that's also something that has been shown to improve the reading experience, the learning experience, if you have questions that you're asking while you're reading. So yeah, those are just a few examples. And then something that I do also on a regular basis is just using ChatGPT to ask for critical feedback. Whenever I have created something that I don't know, that I'll put out there in some way, it could be a discussion with someone, it could be even an email or something that is very important. I would ask ChatGPT, did I miss something here? Is there anything that could be improved? So you produce the first draft and then you ask for critical feedback. That is, I think, a quite useful and powerful use case of AI in research in general as well.
Thank you, Bernhard. And let me tell you, we're getting a lot of comments in the stream asking how to access QualiGuides. So I'm not sure it's not super complicated, but it's a little complicated. So I guess if you are attending, and I don't know how many of you are specifically connected with us here at ABTS, if you reach out to the ABTS office at abts.asia, we can try and help you to get access to QualiGuides, explain how to do it. I know Bernhard would probably just say you can go to the GPT store in ChatGPT, but if you don't know how to do that, that can be a little complicated. So if you are wanting to access QualiGuides and you're not sure how to do it, you can reach out to the ABTS office and you can find that email address also at our website if you didn't catch that, but it's office@abts.asia. Okay, and Ben, did you have anything that you would like to share about how you'd like to see AI further integrated into education?
For me personally, we talked about assessment design as well, but I'm seeing this as a place where you actually can emulate or simulate a viva, an oral examination where the examiner asks you questions and you're in real time talking back to the AI. And this is a way in which you can have a human examiner sitting and watching the entire process and then step in when you have to, but you can have the entire thing automated. The technology is here right now. I mean, we can do it. I've done similar versions of that. So this is one huge way in which you can kind of assess how this works and how this if you go underneath the hood, it's kind of like Notebook LLM, where you're feeding the LLM the kind of information you want it to assess. Technical term is retrieval augmented generation. You're feeding it your particular documents. You're creating the questions, and then you're also feeding it a rubric on how to assess the student. So we can do this right now with AI avatars and speech recognition. So this is one way in which I see things going. Secondly, we're talking about changing digital pedagogy and moving away from what we traditionally use. And Greg, you know this, I'm a big believer in game-based learning. And when you introduce the concept of games, not gamification, games, the entire learning experiences in a game, your engagement levels go super high. And we have actual research on this, that within games, there's high level of interaction and high level of engagement and understanding as well. So incorporating AI into game-based learning is a huge part of my personal push. And I definitely see that within the next couple of years coming out very strongly.
Simply because you mentioned it, Ben, you have a website, right? That they can go to. You have a sample game that you've created to kind of illustrate using games in education, right?
That's right. Yeah, I do have a site. I could put it, Greg, you could put it on the chat. But it's basically, I created a game where you go to Southeast Asia to teach English as a foreign language. And then it's like a choose your adventure kind of style. You start to learn the culture in that place. And this is part of using my intercultural learning, putting it into a game format. I've had quite a bit of interaction on this, and I've had people come up to me saying, can we change this and make it into something where we are discovering the time period of Jesus, for example, and learn cultural aspects of there. So it's essentially a visual novel format. And I have written a paper on this, on seeing how visual novel games can really identify with current digital pedagogy and take it further.
Great. I'll see if I can get that in the chat. I'm having a little trouble finding it. Maybe you can send it over in the Zoom chat, and I can. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Let me just paste that over for those people on YouTube. If you want to check out the game that Ben has made, you can do that. Yeah, thanks for sharing about that. I just wanted to share really quickly too, as far as like a specific use case that I found as I was looking through some of these tools in the past couple weeks. There's a few that stood out to me, and one that I've been sharing just around the ABTS office it's called Elicit with an E, and it's a academically focused AI, and really, to me, it's what library search always should have been. Like when you're trying to find an article, a journal article, or books on your topic, and it's really hard to find it because you can't quite get the right words to search. It's really great at finding things. And so for me, I wanted to do some research on the story of David and Bathsheba recently. Probably something that would have taken me a day to a day and a half to do just what I wanted to do, to get like a big idea of what the issues were around this topic. And between using Elicit and Notebook LM, it took me about an hour and a half instead of a day and a half to get really good results. to find really good, solid articles and books and to get great summaries of them. Now, for me, I'm still going to go and I'm going to read all those articles. I'm still going to do all the work, but it saved me the time of not having to spend an hour reading a journal article that didn't actually have anything to do with what I wanted to read about. Right. And so that's kind of what we said before earlier on in the session, that it's a lot of these tools are more useful to you the more you know. So I knew what I was looking for. I knew the kind of questions I was asking. And so I could use a tool that's academically oriented to find what I was looking for much faster and much easier than I used to be able to do that. And so that, to me, again, is a great example of how to honestly, ethically use these kind of tools to do the work that you need to do, because it's not doing any of the work for you other than helping you to find those articles. But you're still interacting with them. You're still reading. You're still producing your work. But it's helping you to do that faster. And that's why it's been said several times. Like when you think of these AI tools, not like taking the place of your brain, but as like an assistant, that's when they're most useful. Like, can you do this for me? Because I'm trying to do something else and you can do this faster than me because you're a computer, right? Those are where these tools really shine. And I think that especially as a student, where if you're listening and you're a student, you're going to find the most use out of them because you're still learning how things work. You're still learning those critical thinking skills, and it's not replacing that. It's helping you to do those things better. Did anyone else have anything to add? Or one kind of final question, I guess, unless people have closing things. Do any of you know of any seminaries or other graduate schools, educational institutions that are integrating AI already that you think are a really good example, or not? I know we've shared how we want to see it happen, but do you know of any schools that are doing this well, or is it still too new and people are still trying to figure this out?
Yeah, I'll jump in there quickly. So I'll give one example that I think is along the lines of what we've been discussing so far with customized learning journeys and assessment support. So there's a university in the West Coast of the US in California that is integrating through the use of an LMS augmentation called Nectar to create their own chatbots essentially per course that would be customized towards the content of the course in that particular program. I think they call them Spark or something like that. So really what it's intended to do is to kind of take the place of the emails that would always be sent to faculty members or whatever. How do I access this, or where do I find the syllabus, or what do I do, to this discussion prompt? And so we kind of coach them through, this is where you do this is where you find the syllabus, etc. So there's some, just some time-saving elements for both parties there. But also you can ask questions around, I don't quite understand the assignment. Can you explain it to me? And so again, without giving the answer, so it's not designed to actually tell you that, well, here's what you put in your discussion post, or here's whatever your assignment is, but to actually say this is what it's asking for, give different words to use and things like that. And so I think those are just, that's happening now. That's part of making things an easier journey for learners. And early results from what I've been reading about it is that it has not only increased learner engagement a little bit, but has actually increased GPA for students in those programs that feel that they're able to get answers quicker, just in time, especially across time zones and in asynchronous classes where people are doing things maybe on a Sunday afternoon and then the faculty member isn't at work, and those kind of things. They can get answers to questions a lot quicker. So that's one use case. I think there's many more like that.
Great, thanks. Ben or Bernhard, do you have any institutions or anything that you know that are using these tools well, or could be an example, or are we still all just trying to figure this out?
I'm in talks with some institutions on setting up local LLMs and fine-tuning some of that based on existing research data. Also because of security and privacy concerns as well, us sending things to the cloud. But that's still in talks because we have to look at cost optimization and all of that. But there are some talks on that.
Yeah, so I don't have the like a specific example that I want to share, but it's more like sharing what I have learned when I developed QualiGuides. I think actually it's something that could be done by any educator if they're willing to invest the time and the effort. So I think there is something like a mind shift that could happen, that would be good to happen, I think, among educational institutions, to not think that you're depending on these AI companies, or you're depending on these programmers, computer scientists, more like technically proficient people who can code and write the software and develop the software for you that you then can use, AI-powered software, I mean, of course. And instead, I think you should now start to experiment and see how far you yourself can get with creating something like what you can think of like a system prompt. You could develop like an instruction for the AI, how it should behave in the class you're teaching. And then you could share this with the students, and they would have to paste that into the chatbot in the box at the beginning and hit send, and then the remainder of the chat would be based on those instructions. You could, of course, also create those GPTs if you have this Plus subscription with ChatGPT, but that's essentially the same thing. And I think what many educators haven't realized yet is that they are actually uniquely suited to do that, because the skills you need to tell the AI what it should do are pedagogical skills. You need to break down complex processes into like manageable, smaller steps. You need to be very clear in the way you present it to the AI and so on. And that's what educators do. That's their job, basically. So it shouldn't be too difficult to get good results. And if you do that, and if you put in your pedagogical expertise and make it reflective and all the things that I've talked about regarding QualiGuides, I think it will really be of benefit for the students, and you can be very creative and really tailor it to the specific class that you are teaching. So I hope that things like that will come up more in the near future.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing. We're going to start to draw our time to a close tonight. We've been going for a while. I just want to remind everyone that in the chat, I have put links to Ben's website with his game on, and then also I added a link to QualiGuides as well. Someone is also asking if there's a FAQ or guide for using QualiGuides. I think you can just ask QualiGuides and it will tell you what to do, right? Right. That's the great thing about the GPT. If you just ask it how to use it, it should be able to tell you what to do. But if there's some more additional questions, we can maybe try and deal with those. But as we draw this to a close, I just wonder if all of you have any closing thoughts, hopes, encouragements, whatever you might have for students in terms of AI or its possible uses, or just any final thoughts you might have.
Yeah, maybe I start. So I think when ChatGPT came out, I didn't immediately realize what kind of a big deal it was. Someone showed it to me, and I thought, okay, what should this be good for? So I didn't really get it at the beginning. But then once I realized like its potential and how easily you, as the user, on the consumer side, can adapt it to your needs and get it to do things, I really got excited. And also in terms of my context at the moment, I had the time to really go deep into it and learned a lot. And I think that's kind of the mindset that is required at the moment to make good use of it. Just being excited by its possibilities, then really just jumping right into it and getting your hands dirty in a way and trying to figure out how it works and what works, because not everything will work. You will realize where the limits are. And yeah, and then I think you will really benefit from it. So if you haven't tried it yet, really, or if you have maybe tried it in the past and you thought, oh, I don't know what this is actually good for, I really would recommend trying how far you can get with it and where it takes you.
Yeah, just jumping on what Bernard said, it's good to be intentional in how you use it. For me personally, I struggle with ADHD. So when I have something like ChatGPT, I can just spend time just learning and asking questions, and a lot of time goes. So it's good to know to be intentional in how you're using ChatGPT or any other LLM. And just one way to get intentional about it is to learn prompt engineering. How do you prompt these LLMs to get the right kind of information? So there's enough information online. Learn how to do some of these prompts. Otherwise, I mean, if you're neurodivergent like me, you're going to go down a rabbit hole and learn a lot of stuff. And next thing you know, 4 hours is gone. So be very intentional and be focused on prompt engineering as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just say from a professor point of view, to talking to students, we would always say that just like we've reiterated a few times, that you need to cite your sources where if you use them. So it's not a matter of using it, but it's how you use it and how you explain how you've used it. But I also think as we've alluded to a few different times, use the tools critically as well. So to not assume that if you put a prompt in and it gives you a response, that response is accurate and you should just take that as fact. You should interrogate that, because as we've all probably experienced, there have been times where you put in a prompt and you get an answer back and you know that's wrong based on your own expertise and knowledge. And if you didn't have that expertise or knowledge and you just assumed that answer was correct, that's a big problem. And some might say, well, that's also true if you read a book or something. The person writing the book doesn't necessarily, have all the facts. But I think that's just something that maybe at times people think, well, if I got it off GPT, it's kind of like, well, I got it off Google, so it must be right. Not everything you're going to get back is correct. And if you use it as a thought partner, as we've been saying, to kind of critique what you have done and add to your own thinking, that's probably the best way to think of tools, the LLM tools, and then just learn some new skills in relation to things that can help save time on presentations and some of the things that maybe we spend a lot of time on that we no longer need to spend time on.
Great, thank you guys so much. And I guess just for me to add one more thing that hasn't been said, since ABTS is hosting this, ask your professor. Like, if you're not sure, is it okay for me to do this? Is it not okay? Just ask. Because, in a lot of cases, we're still figuring this out too. And, there's a chance that maybe the professor you have is like, oh, you can't use it for anything. But then if you say, well, this is what I'm trying to have it do, well, they might reconsider. And because maybe they just don't understand what you're using it for. And there are some really great useful use cases for this. And so again, just ask. There's never any hurt in asking your professor either for help or for, is this okay? Is this not okay? Because let me tell you, that's a lot better than getting an email from your professor saying that was not okay, right? So communication is key. We're here and we're human so that you can ask us. And I want to thank Ben, Bernhard, and Daryl so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate all of your insights and your thoughts and just the time that you've spent and devoted to this, just to have this discussion. I want to thank everyone who's joined us on the stream as well. And there's been some good conversation in there, I'm seeing, and I appreciate you all taking the time to think through these things. And I hope that we'll all continue to think through them in the future and to figure out how to use these tools better in a way that not only increases our understanding, our education, but also glorifies God in the process. And I just want to, again, thank you all for your evening, and especially for our panel members for taking the time out to do this. Thanks so much. We're going to close for tonight. Thanks. Goodbye. Okay, stream is officially over. Sorry, there's a little bit of lag. I wanted to make sure I